That's what it is.
So, Dr. Shingi Mabima actually is an alumnus of, MSU. I don't think there's enough words I can use to describe him. He's done amazing things. Especially like African literature and poetry. I've learned a lot from him just observing him from afar. And also with the writing of the book Pashena, which is an amazing book on the story of coming of age. A great story that I read and really enjoyed. I would say it's pretty much in the top 5-10 books I've read about Africa. So it's a great book, and I can't wait to hear his insights, deep insights as to his experiences writing such a book. And I'm gonna allow him to introduce himself much more because I can do justice to that. So yeah, welcome, Dr. Pashena.
How you doing, folks? First of all, I must apologize. Hey, I know you. How you doing, man? I just had I'm teaching African history at the University of Toledo now. So, we just had a faculty meeting that ended at like 5:30, and I got on the road right away. But I was a little under the weather, so I had to stop a couple of times for some medicine and whatnot. But so I appreciate you guys being here. Like His Excellency said, the name is Shingima Vima, alumnus of the African American and African Studies Department at Michigan State University. Born and raised in Zimbabwe. Shout out. Man, that's crazy. And it's an honor to be here, man. I remember Asla's formative years back in the day with the Malian presidents. That's way back. So it's good to see what you guys what this has all become. Now, there were supposed to be questions.
Right.
Answer the questions.
Oh, they are answering the questions.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, tell me, man. Are we? Yeah. Okay. Just this is your program, man. Let me know what we're doing.
Well, firstly, we are very excited to be able to ask you these questions today. My name is Aaliyah. I'm PR of ASLA.
My name is Abib, and I'm just part of the committee.
So our first question we would like to ask you is, what inspired you to write this novel?
What inspired me to write this novel? So I think in many ways we have a story to tell, each of us do, and some of us will sing, some of us will, will tell it to our friends or whatever, some of us we never get around to telling it, but I think we all do, right? So it was born out of that, out of just wanting to tell this story as far as inspiration goes. Now, to what Luyando was saying earlier, I noticed that there was, so this story I was going to tell it anyway, regardless of what literature dynamics there were. But I did notice that there was a certain privileged, and I use privilege almost ironically here because it's not actually a story of privilege, but it was privilege in that is the African story that people wanted to hear. And if it wasn't A Long Way Gone, I think that's what it's called, the Sierra Leonean book about the child soldiers, if it wasn't The Girl Who Smiled Beads by Clementine, which was talking about surviving the Rwandan genocide. And I say this as somebody who absolutely loves these books and admires the strength of both those writers, both of whom I've had the chance to meet. But there is also, when you talk about when you talk about American stories, right? It could be everything from something as crazy as Mississippi Burning, it's or this tragic Titanic type movies. Those are American stories. Or it can be about Ferris Bueller's Day Off, right? Or you say Holden Caulfield running away from school and all these things, right? So I felt like the Western narrative was given permission to be very diverse and to sometimes be mundane, And I wanted to tell the story. I wanted just to tell the story of, we were playing soccer on the fields of Zimbabwe in the 90s, Things were tough, of course, because things are tough in many places with this challenge, that challenge. But also, this is not a story of overwhelming genocide, or this is not a story of just the purge or these sort of things, right? It's okay. This is the story of me, my grandma coming back from work in a white uniform, and I've been playing soccer all day, so I'm dirty as well. Then, running up and giving her a hug. Now her recently bleached white uniform is now brown, and those little dynamics, right? Me and my friends throwing rocks at bullies and whatever these things, right? That's as much an African story as the African story that is of apartheid, that is of genocide. And so I just wanted to enter this space and say, you know what, African child, you don't have to prove your suffering for your story to matter. You are just because you are. So that was a large inspiration as to why I went through with the telling of the story. So, indeed.
And going back to, as you mentioned, you ran to hug your grandma. She was coming back from work. I remember you mentioned in the book there was a part where you guys were banned from the field because of just the way boys are. What was the biggest lesson you learned from your grandma telling you guys you can't play on the field anymore, even though you told the boys and?
Yeah. What lesson did I learn, man? So a lot of lessons from that field, right? But in that particular situation, one, grandma's always right. It's probably the most important lesson you learn. But I think just it's issues of respect. You know what I'm saying? It's there was a fundamental breakdown of respect in that story, where my friends who I loved so much were snickering when my grandma was trying to admonish us about something, was inquiring about something, right? Yeah. So in the moment, it seems like unjust, but yeah, that's one. You gotta respect the elders, but also, it's, know who matters most. Know who matters most. Are you? This is outside of the book, but it's something I was thinking about with the time between undergrad and there was a time when I was in undergrad and we were in me and the boys were in some pretty destructive behaviors, and I really didn't care much for it, but I'll be like, you know what, if I tap out, if I say like, nah, I don't want to do that, or whatever, this kind of thing, I'll lose my connection with these guys, right? So we do it. And the reason I started thinking about it is like, I haven't heard from that dude in like 5 years. I was like, I was really betraying myself, doing something that I didn't care much for, to preserve a connection that I ended up just losing anyway. You know what I'm saying? So I say that, again, that's outside the bounds of the books, but those are some of the lessons, right? Like, there are relationships and values that endure, okay? And, the sooner you can identify those, the better, because other things will always be here, right? Your friends who are goofy and this stuff, they're fun to be with, you know what I'm saying? But is that worth jeopardizing the trust or the, of this other relationship that is far more important? So, yeah, that's a big lesson that I can say I learned from that. Yeah.
So, when going back to when you were writing the book,
yeah,
did you feel a lot of pressure? Did you feel like because it was so different from the usual narratives of African stories, did you feel like you wouldn't get a lot of people to read it? Like, did you feel?
No. If I felt, I didn't feel any pressure at all. One, because your story is your story. You know what I'm saying? Like, I felt. That's the one thing that even when people ask me like how many copies have you sold, I hate that question because one, it's not a lot, but more importantly, I hate it because it commodifies something that I don't think is a commodity to me. This is the story I wanted to tell. So when I put it out, I remember the first time the published copy I haven't actually been able to take to Zimbabwe. and show all the people who are in it. You know, every now and then, if like my father comes in, I'll give him a copy. Hey, then you go give this person a copy. But a lot of the people who are the mainstays of the book have not actually seen it. But halfway, I was done writing it and we were still editing it. I got to go back to Zimbabwe for when I was doing my research, and I said, just gave them like portions of it. There was one friend who features prominently in it, Tar, if you've read it, the guy named Tar. And I say some things about even his parents, in that book, and I'd asked him at the time, I'm going to tell some stories like this, but I didn't know what they would look like when he actually read them, And he is in tears just laughing at different parts of it, right? And for me, that was all the validation I needed for that story, I'm saying? Like, what becomes of the book out there, If it becomes a bestseller or if only my family buys it. I didn't feel pressure because I wasn't writing it. Maybe when I said it was going to be a different book, if it resonates, I think those conversations started to come more as we were editing it and, publishing it and things like that. But as far as telling the story, I was going to tell the story regardless, So I didn't really feel pressure. If the only pressure I would have felt is how are these people I'm talking about going to take it, How am I telling the story of Nangamvura, which as far as I'm concerned has never been told before, right? How are people going to take it? So that was only really the pressure that I felt. Yeah.
So would you say that like for other writers out there that want to like publish their stories, like do you think? Because I like to write,
Okay.
and it's a little scary to like put my work out there, and so that's why I meant like pressure, because like I get scared about what other people, like if I write poorly or if it'll be this like criticisms.
Yeah.
You were afraid of the people that you wrote about being concerned.
Yeah, there was that, right? But and that's more how you preserve your relationships, right? That's a little bit different. And I say this as somebody, I'm not one of those person who says like, I don't care what people think, because I do, but quite a bit. But here's the thing. I found that for me, I always worry or fear rejection or fear those criticisms in a disproportionate way to how they hit me when they're about to happen, It's always scarier prior to that, Because think about it. Worst case scenario, what happens? You've written the story and nobody reads it, right?
Right.
Now, how bad is that actually? It's not as bad as we, what I'm saying? Now you just have this project that maybe, one day you want to share it with like your parents, your friends, your kids, eventually whatever. Hey guys, I once wrote this story. Boom, it just becomes that story, So that I feel like is the worst case scenario, unless you're just being like mad, offensive, or you're talking crazy criminal stuff and you end up in prison for it, unless, or if you're living in like say like Nazi Germany, for example, where you're writing that would be criminalized. Here, like you know what? When I'm not doing this, sometimes I'll record a rap song. I'm terrible, but you know what I'm saying? The worst case thing that happens is like, 8 listens in the past 2 years on SoundCloud, I guess that sucks, But if it goes well, also, it could become like this, So I really, and I hope that just grants whoever is interested in writing some perspective, Like, I don't even remember some of the things that, if you ask me, like, how many views, like, I also do a lot of poetry and I put them out on YouTube and stuff like that. My best one is maybe my best, which means like artistically my best, is maybe 100 views. Then some other stuff that I've done that's kind of like more clickbaity is like thousands of views, So if I'm being true to myself, I probably don't want to hear that stuff again, because I'm like, that was okay. But it resonated with people. It's not a reflection on my artistry, So one, write for yourself. And, I think that's the most important thing. Write to tell the story that you want to tell. At a certain point, put it out, People probably, some people criticize it. Just first of all, do your due diligence. Don't just put out things that are below your standard. And then, of course, then you set yourself about it. But, if you have fun with it and you put in your work, put it out. maybe 1 in every 10 people will be mad at it. 1 in 20, 1 in 100, and sometimes that sticks out to us because we want to be perfect. But just remember why you did it. You wrote it for yourself, and you achieved that purpose. So I really encourage that. Yeah.
Another question I had, totally unrelated. I mean, kind of related, but
Yeah.
so do you have any ideas or plans of what you would like to see happen in the future to Pashena, where you guys used to tear it up, play around and make friends and all that? Or,
Talking about the space?
Yes.
Well, the space, I don't want to spoil it for folks who are going to read it, but the space is became unavailable at the end of the story, So by that reason, Pashena itself, kind of continues to exist in our memories. But in as far as the larger community in general, I've folks like
Press the off button.
Oh, where's that?
folks like Arnold, for example, will be
Thank you.
very familiar with it. But I've got a non-profit Clubhouse International, which is we help send kids from those same communities to school, and we do community service projects. We also use soccer as a central sort of organizing point. When we do our festivals, they culminate in a soccer match between the school that I went to and our main rivals, the school that I went to, eventually. So this was my form of giving back. Actually, before Pashena was written, the organization that became Clubhouse International, the name Pashena was considered as going to be the name of the organization because that was always an ideal that stuck so much with me, So that space itself, may be unavailable in a sense, but I think we keep the memory alive by way of that. That guy I'm talking about, Ta, is, remember, if you remember the story, he starts to play basketball, and it's kind of bad in the beginning. Now he's the manager of the local basketball team in Tari, you know what I'm saying? And it's a pretty big deal, you know what I'm saying? It's a feeder team for the province, And right now I know some of the boys are in South Africa on the basis of his coaching and managing, So, I say all this to say like the memory of Pashena lives on in these ways. Actually, funny story was there's a character Wellington in the book, who takes on table tennis after his parents have passed away and things like that, and it kind of becomes this resolve. And I was trying to remember the story because it's one of the people that I didn't really keep in touch with over the years, So as I was writing, I was like, wait, was he really into table tennis, as I remember it, But in any case, I'll tell the story as I remember it. Maybe fudge some details for storytelling's sake, So, I remember him playing table tennis, and would be in his house doing this on the living room table, playing like ping pong on it, But I don't know how far he ever took it, Am I just remembering it wrong? Then when I finally reconnected with him, way after Pashena was written, he's like, yo, how have you been, man? He's like, yo, listen, I'm gonna be traveling to the Southern African Regional Ping Pong Championships. I was like, oh my God, it's been like 20 years, and you're still doing it. So I guess that really was a thing. I wasn't wrong about that. So I said, the reason he was telling me that was he wanted to see if I could buy him some bats because he felt like the paddles he used for ping pong. He felt like he wasn't competitive enough with the bats he had. So I sent him a couple off of some of the Pashena proceedings because that's how you give back. So, so yeah.
Did you have all of your family members read your book? Has all of your family?
Well, no. The family that is in the U.S. I don't know, they've bought it. I don't know. I know my younger brother read it, but he was one of the people who helped me edit it, so he read it. I know he read it because of that. I know my dad has read it. My dad is back in Zimbabwe. But that side of the family is not the family that I lived with, or that is my siblings here have grown up in the U.S., so they're almost reading this with the fascination of what growing up in Zimbabwe would have been like for them. The family in Zimbabwe, or my mom's side of the family who is in the story, or who I was living with when this happened. My mom has read it. Yes, my mom has read it. Oh yeah, and my other cousin, who I talked about. But all these people read it during editing, you know what I'm saying? So I don't think anybody on that side of the family has seen, except for my mom, has seen and read the finished version. So I'll be traveling there this Christmas break, so I'll take a few copies and see if they will, how much they will appreciate it. And, yeah.
I have another question. For future writers, can you give us like a timeline of how long it took you to kind of put it on pen and paper and have it published and stuff of that nature?
Okay, so I could tell you that answer, right? But I don't want to tell you that answer on the basis of for future writers. I could tell you what it was for me.
Okay.
But it is absolutely of no utility for anybody else writing, because that is such a very individual, unique, distinct experience for each person, you know? Because you could be like me and start writing. I wrote the first 13 pages on A4 paper, on 8 by 11. This thing is like 150 or so pages. I think single spaced, right? So 300 double spaced pages if you do that. I wrote the first 13 pages in like 2 weeks, right? Then didn't write again for another year. You know what I'm saying? As I went through different things. Then I started back after that, you know? So even just to quantify how much time it actually took me is hard to do. But I know that I started writing it maybe around July of 2012 and finished it because now I had to come for the PhD here, so I wanted to get it done, all that before then. I would say like I was done maybe December of 2013. So a year and a half of just writing, right? Maybe a little bit before then. Then I started to send it to different people who I strategically chosen to give me some feedback. Then I would say the first version that could have been shopped around for publishing was ready maybe June 2014, so 2 years after I started. Then I came to the Black Studies program here, the African American and African Studies program here. Then I reread it after that first year of my PhD. I just hated a bunch of it, you know? And the last part of what I hated was I was getting, at the risk of being cliche, I got a little more woke, you know? There were certain portrayals of Africa I realized I had played into. I was like, wait a minute, that is not us, you know? Do you wanna go hang out at so and so's house? You don't hang out, man. We go play. You wanna go play? Yeah, you know. So changing some of that little language to reflect more of our reality, you know. Even some of the stereotypical things. So I went and I redid a bunch of it over that summer. Then at that point I was like, you know what? I'm done. It's good. If I keep doing this, I'll keep realizing more and more things and keep changing it. Which is the other reason why I wanted to get it published then, so that I could bring closure to that story. Because I felt also, for as long as I was working on Pashena, you know, I was never going to be able to write another story. And also I felt like I was fast becoming a different person from the one who had written that story. Does that make sense? If you're music fans, right, you know for a fact that, I don't know if there's any Drake fans here, Drake could not put out Nothing Was the Same right now, you know, or Thank Me Later right now, you know, because he is no longer that Drake of that time, you know. So I just use that as a thing to say, like, I had to move on to other topics. I have to move on to other things that were more representative of the space that I'm in now. So I wanted to put it close to that, put it out. So yeah, it took me that long. But you know, one of the books that really helped shape my writing is a book by the horror and writer Stephen King, and the book is just called On Writing. and he just kind of, first of all, he's autobiographical. Then in the second part, he talks about some of the advice to writers, and he talks about people write differently, man. Some people will start with the conclusion and work backwards. Some people will say, and Stephen King talks about this. This postman who would get up every morning, and he had to go to work at 10. So every single day, come rain or sunshine, between 9 and 10, he would write. Then wherever he was, he would stop there, Then he would pick it up the next day. Then you get somebody else who would be like, today I'm writing all day, or I'm writing until I get this episode. So that I'm more of the episodic writer, which is like, there's the time when I went to MSU and I met with the Ashla students, right? So that could, I don't know how long that's going to be. Maybe that's like a story that's 100 words, or it could be 2,000 words. But I'm only stopping when I tell that whole story, right? So that I can start on the next episode tomorrow, which is why sometimes Pashena reads like it's a lot of like little stories joined together, because I would write until that part of the story is done, So yeah, I know I said a lot about that, but that's sort of the essence of how long it took me to write and the processes thereof. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you kind of learned a lot from Stephen King as an author. Were there any other African writers that you learned from or looked up to?
Let me say this, and the Stephen King, I don't wanna overblow what I mean by I learned a lot from him. His book is literally called On Writing,
Right.
So he's kind of giving certain tips on these things. I didn't learn how to write, by way of him. He actually came in when I was like, this thing was already going on, right? But it's just good to have somebody who's done that. But a lot of my influences, but I didn't learn from them by them telling me like, okay, do 1, 2, 3, or like these are the things you should do. I learned from them by reading them. You know what I'm saying? So, for example, Ngugi wa Thiong'o, who's a Kenyan writer, Kikuyu writer, one of my favorites. A lot of Zimbabwean writers, the likes of Charles Mungoshi, Tsitsi Dangarembga, Chenjerai Howe, these sort of folks. And with Charles Mungoshi in particular, he just passed away last year. One of the funny things I noticed was when you're reading a lot, and once you become more aware as a writer, you pay attention to this. When you read a lot, and if you read while you're writing, what do you think may happen? You're right. There's certain segments when I was like, I just described the landscape for like a whole page here. That's not what I do. But I know who does that though, and I bet you I can tell you what book I was reading when I wrote like this, So I would go back and say like, okay, dial it down a little bit, man. You don't need to describe the horizon and stuff. That is not your style. But Mungoshi does that so well, right? I'll be reading like Paulo Coelho, the writer of The Alchemist, and I'm talking about how the universe has brought things together. I'm like, what? That's him. You know what I'm saying? So you can tell that. You can tell that too when that's happening. So, but yeah, those are some of the writers that really influenced me. I'd say Ngugi is high up on the list. The ones that I mentioned, Tsitsi Dangarembga, Chenjerai Howe, whose book Bones is incredible. Also, though, this is worth mentioning, that when you talk about African literature, right, and the evolution thereof, traditionally there's been two groups that people talk about. There's the traditionalists, okay, and the traditionalists are the folks who are talking about the colonial era and that time period. So the people who come to mind are Chinua Achebe, Ngugi wa Thiong'o, Ngugi wa Miri, for example. Then there was the generation we call the modernists. And the modernists are the likes of people who were writing maybe towards the end of the 20th century, the likes of Dambudzo Marechera, right? These folks who were kind of more, it's kind of more trippy, Then there's a generation now which we call the Afropolitan generation. And the Afropolitan include people like Chimamanda Adichie, Bettina Gapa, No Violet Bulawayo, this sort of folks. So these are some of the people who I consider I'm not saying like I'm on their level in terms of, well, I don't think I'm like not as good as they are, you know. But I'm obviously not on their level of fame or influence or anything like that. But I consider them to be, if you can take this as humbly as I can put it, as modestly as I can put it, I consider that to be the peer group that I belong to, you know, even though I'm like nowhere close to them in terms of being successful. But I feel like that is the writing culture that I represent, you know, this Afropolitan sort of, right, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Would any of the audience members have any questions?
I had a question.
Yes.
So, what was the publishing process like for you?
Wow, that's a good question. So, this is not the first. This is the first sort of story I published, but I had published actually two poetry anthologies prior to that. And the first anthology came out in 2012. It's called Homeward Bound. I'm only bringing this in so that I can show you how the processes compare. So this one, you know, kind of fresh out of college, just really wanting to get this idea out, put it together myself. So that one I self-published. And Amazon is a great facility called CreateSpace. CreateSpace is an Amazon facility where you can self-publish. I don't remember how much it cost me, but it's for the low. It's like $30 or something like that. But you have to get, you know, you have to pretty much create the book yourself, which a lot of people enjoy that. So format it and all this stuff, but then they'll give you the ISBN numbers and all those things, right? You know, you have to do the cover, and some people go that route. That is a very good way to publish if you just want to get something out, you know, because it's an Amazon thing. The book is also perpetually on Amazon. It never runs out. You know, it's always on Amazon. Only on Amazon though, but you can buy it yourself. You know, and cost you like $2 a copy or something like that. So I used to sell it for like $10, so you can buy copies for yourself and sell them yourself. So that's CreateSpace. It's pretty good. It's you know, but I mean, self-publishing sometimes carries a stigma with it. You know, the following publishers I went with was a small company out of New Jersey. There's two young ladies, and that one was okay. They were starting up, and they knew that I did some poetry. One of them had engaged some of my work prior, and so they actually approached me and said like, "Yo, would you be interested in working with us on this thing?" I was like, you know what, no harm done. You know, I'm still up and coming as a poet. You guys are starting. You know, we'll grow together, right? You know, this will be one of your earlier projects as you grow. So again, that one didn't cost me much, but they did a professional job of putting it together and things like that. Kind of fell out a little bit because even though I hadn't paid anything for it, you know, there's certain things that I feel like having a publisher as opposed to self-publishing should provide, you know, and all those things I think is like a good marketing. And I felt like I did all the marketing myself after the book came out. There was also like little money issues, which I kind of felt like it wasn't crazy, but it was just sort of, well, they're supposed to be, I can't remember what really happened, but they, in any case, one of the things that happened was there was something in the contract that said, rewind a little bit. So they couldn't distribute it properly, right? So one of the things was like, the book was only available on their website, and for a long time not on Amazon and things like that. Well, you can't, in this market, you cannot be selling a book on your pub. Nobody goes to that site, you know. People never ask me like, yo, what's their name? They always say like, is it on Amazon? That's the question that you get asked. So they didn't do that, you know. So what I did was, all the copies that I would buy from them, right, I started to put it on Amazon myself. But there was something in the contract that said, for the first, I don't know how long, 2 years or something like that, books can only be sold exclusively by the publisher, or in any case, you can't use a third party to sell the book, right? Which is fair and that's standard publishing procedure. However, if I buy the books from them, Amazon is no longer a third party. You know what I'm saying? I'm not even like a law kind of person, but even I can tell you that a third party means you and I and him are involved in this transaction. That's what a third party means, right? But if I say, you know what, this hat is yours, you know, and you give it to him, he is not a third party because two parties and this transaction was complete, and you can do whatever you want with it, you know? So it's only a third party. If I say, like, can you hold this for me, and you give it to him, you know, now you've given it to a third party. So that's one of the debates we had. I was like, no, because you can't tell me then, like, what's the point of me holding on to these books for 2 years? You know, after 2 years, the steam is out, which means I really can't sell these books at all, you know, and you're not selling them.
Right.
So, so we fell out that way. But in any case, and I say that I chalk that a lot to them being new. The company ended up folding a little bit after that as well. So what that means is that when a publishing company falls, you retain, like, for as long as depending on your contract, maybe sometimes people do it for a number of years, but when you sign a contract with the publishing company, it only means like only they have the rights to publishing that story. You can't just take your story elsewhere unless there's a breach of contract. But if the company ever falls, then now you can retain all your rights and you can shop it out to other people. So that was the second one. Now the third one is also a smaller company, this time out of Detroit, called House Capacity Publishing. And this one has been a little bit better, actually significantly better. But also a part of it is I actually paid them to publish the book, you know. So I honestly think, like, outside of like maybe just not knowing what they were doing, the last company, like for a new company to do it for free, you know, it's really a strain on their resources, you know. So I almost empathize with them. But these guys, I paid them, you know, so they were able to go all out with designing, go all out with making sure that the book is on Amazon, it's on Barnes and Noble, it's on a few different spaces, right? Even like I could tell you that like the campaign that they've done it's still not like top notch, you know, because I feel like, I don't know, man, I never see like J.K. Rowling in commercials or on Facebook trying to hype up their book, you know. But I have to do that stuff, you know. But I'm just, I mean, I say this in jest, but I feel like, yeah, of course, more could be done, because a writer, your skill is the writing, you know. Like a lot of writers, you know, I'm pretty sociable and like this, you know, which serves me okay. But I know a lot of writers that are very antisocial, you know. So I'm like, I would hate to be like that and still have to market the book, you know. So that's why I usually have like a machine to help you do that. You know, that's some of the things that the publishing house is supposed to help you with. So, you know, I paid them. Actually, there was a stated figure which would have involved 3 rounds of editing. So it's different layers, right? You can say different plans, maybe to pay all at once, and you can get it done this way and this way. You know what I mean by packages? So, for example, they'll say, we'll do the whole book and 1 round of editing, then we'll give it back to you. We'll do it with 3 rounds of editing, then we'll publish it. And for that, there's different costs, right? $1,500, $2,000, $25, whatever. There's different costs. So I was able to negotiate with them. I was like, look, man, I know I've done thorough editing of this book. I can promise you, you're not going to need 3 rounds of editing. So what is it going to, because they didn't actually have a package for 1 round of editing. I was like, how about we say 1 round of editing and you take a few $100s off of it? That's because, like, not because I had written it well, which I felt like I had, but also I'd already had like pretty thorough people, for example, my mom, read it, you know. So I knew that it was pretty tight already, you know. So we ended up doing that. Took them, the process started in August. The book came out in May, so about 8 months or so. You know, but from like March, April, we were doing pre-orders because we could tell it was coming. Yeah, that is the publishing process in the long and short. The big thing that I've been having to press them on is, because they're also a smaller company, so some of those inefficiencies come in, and they usually come in when it involves my money. You know what I'm saying? Funny thing is, when I was doing the payment plan for them, they were never late with the reminders. You know, never late. If I was like, one time it was over Christmas break and, you know, I'd run out of money, I was like, yo, I just want to let you know that your money is coming. It might take me 2 or 3 more days for my check to come in, but I will be there. Oh, yeah, you're a valued customer. The end of the following day, yeah, so how's that money looking? Now, the shoe's on the other foot. Hey, I still haven't received my payment for March. March? I thought you guys were on point. You know what I'm saying? Now it's been a couple months and they're still, but it's always like that. But if it's your money, you know, you're kind of on point about it until, you know, I'm not really sweating it, but, you know, I know it comes eventually. But, and thank God that it's not like it's not where I'm looking to eat, you know, but it's just something interesting to know about these publishers as well. And they're a smaller company, so I think like they do a lot of the different things themselves, you know. So hopefully as they grow, they get somebody who's just in charge of the finances, but yeah.
So was this something you always intended to publish? Because I know you said that you were writing for yourself, but then also you wanted to get it published so you would stop changing things. Was it like,
Yeah,
how was
yeah.
that?
No, when I started changing things, that it was pretty much a given that I was going to publish it. But you know, I'd written this story. The first ever rendition of the story was, you guys take first year writing,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, I remember writing some version of this in my first year writing class. Back when I started, you know, a few pages here and there. So I'm like, oh yeah, this is fun, you know, this is, well, I got a story to tell. So I've always meant to tell that story. But as far as publishing goes, you know, but like I said, I'd already published these poetry things, so I was already kind of familiar with, you know, with getting things out there. So yeah, I knew that I was gonna, you know, I felt positively that I wanted to get it out there. And also importantly, even though it was kind of for me, and you know, again, I want the story of Langa Bura read, you know, and I wanted the people who I was writing about to know that they were represented, you know, so I wanted to get it out for those reasons. Did you have a question?
So by like writing your story and like having it accessible to the world, do you think that it has kind of helped change like misconceptions about Zimbabwe?
No, you know, that's just being honest. I would hate to oversell the influence that this book has had, you know. Again, first of all, it has not been broadcast as widely as to have any significant cultural influence, you know. And also, I feel like it also doesn't romanticize the story of Zimbabwe, you know, which is the other extreme that people fall into. Either we fetishize poverty and everything is genocide and AIDS and things like that, or, you know, we were all kings and queens and Africa is the land of milk and honey and stuff. And I feel like, well, yeah, neither of those things are true. There might be like some semblance of truth on either extreme, you know? So I try to tell a more nuanced story, the highs and the lows. So I don't think it has done that. But I just wanted to contribute to the canon of literature in Africa, so that maybe when you read 5 books on Zimbabwe, you get to see a more complete picture if Pashena is another one that is there, you know. So, yeah.
Okay. So my question is, I know you did your PhD here and you did Southern nationalism in Southern Africa, and you're also writing. So like in the long term, do you see yourself writing more and bringing your work that you will do with your PhD into your writing, or just writing stories like Pashena and all this?
No, absolutely right. Well, first of all, I have to write because that's how I keep my job. As far as regarding the PhD things, but of creative writing, if you're talking about these kind of things, yeah, I already have a couple projects that I'm working on right now that I'm hoping to pursue. Hopefully see through the next couple of years, creative writing. And a lot of it really comes into also my fascination with my PhD was a lot of like popular expressions of these things. So I'm already like a scholar of like the literature or even the storytelling, whether it's by music or poetry or things like that. So a lot of that kind of I dabble in both, right? Like my literary father Ngugi does. You know, Ngugi will write Grain of Wheat, as a novel. They didn't write Decolonizing the Mind as a way to think about African literature on the other side. So yeah, a lot of those things come together. So I'm going to be publishing, of course, the academic works, continuing to do so. And of course, my vantage point of that, with that influences my creative writing as well. So for sure, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was just thinking when you're talking about how when you're writing, you're trying so hard not to, let's say, be too descriptive and try to follow somebody else's style or something like that. So, like, when you were writing, are there any aspects of, like, African writers that you try to, let's just say, abide by? And what I mean is, let's say in the sense of music, let's say I'm trying to make music in Jamaica, like, as much as I want to be unique, I also want people to know that, like, there's like that Jamaican vibe in the music.
Yeah.
So I'm like, in your book, are there those things that you're paying attention to? Like, I also want to still stay in that whole field of being like an African writer.
Okay, I see what you mean. Primarily, I find, so some of the conventions, right? Pretty much what he's asking. Some of the conventions. I think you see that shine through a lot with some of the language choice, where, one of the things that African literature tends to do, even just like African oral tradition tends to do a lot, is it's very figurative, if you talk to somebody who's not, when I talk to a lot of earlier on, when I talk to my American friends, even to this day, they think I'm being so poetic in how I speak, But you know very well, if you know like an African language, that every other thing is a proverb or a metaphor. Or, like we say, we'll see whether, I don't know, I'm just thinking, the elephant doesn't find his tusks too heavy for him, How's school going? Well, then I'll say something like that, Then I'll be like, what does that mean? I'm just saying, like, if it's your burden, you carry it, That's literally what it means when you say that. And we just have like a ton of those. So I feel like you see that shine through a lot, I could really just write a literal story, but there's a lot of those sort of, what we say, as the elders say, or even if I'm not actually citing some conventional wisdom, just making up my own sort of proverb like that, right? See, one thing is like another thing. So that's one convention that I really abide to. The other convention I abide to, and this is really based in our reality, is this idea of communalism, right? Because I feel like, especially as the world gets more increasingly individualistic, the Western world, even other places, even in Zimbabwe, people are getting pretty individualistic as things get tougher. But just to abide by the conventions of communalism, that may seem very foreign to other communities. How are you getting in trouble and getting disciplined by your neighbors from 4 doors down? Things like that. That may be like, yeah, that's not your mom, But for us, it's kind of like. So I made sure to emphasize those themes as well. This communalism, the fact that everybody's child and everybody's parent. Which I feel like is very apparent in novels too, where in a lot of African literature, a lot of times like the Charles Mungo's book I was talking about, Waiting for the Rain. I read it. Since I started reading it in 2012, I read it every other year, maybe, and I still take time to figure out, like, okay, who's dad, or what is the family tree here? Because it seems like everybody is treating everybody like their son or their mom, or so this sort of thing. So those are some conventions that shine through as well. And I think that is pretty standard in a lot of African literature for sure. Indeed. Brimo, what's up, man?
Yeah, man, Marvin. Congrats first of all on your book.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, job well done, man. I just have a question, I want to know how have you dealt with expectations, especially of yourself and those around you by, let's say, family.
Mm-hmm.
From the time you started your book up to now that you've published it? What are some of the coping mechanisms you have used, that has helped you with expectations? Because I know one or two, there might be a few of them.
So, when you say expectations, what I'm trying to
like what you think. Let's say one part is what you think. Let's say what you want to do, right? Your goals, your objectives. That's one of them.
Yeah.
And the other thing is the second part will be family expectations. Those are like not necessarily what you want to do, but what they expect of you. Like I know from the background I grew up,
yes.
Family, African parents especially, they have this kind of way of wanting to see their children or their like people be, grow or like represent in society. So like how have you coped with those things?
Okay, I see what you mean. So a couple of things, right? First of all, sometimes I hate it when people just come up here and they're just all inspiring and they're talking about, you have to work hard and do these things, and they never talk about the lucky breaks that they got, So I must say that I'm, the most important family relationship I have at this stage is that with my mom, and she's very, very supportive of the things that I do, and also cut me some free rein without letting me run wild. But so already that is a variable that I feel like you can't regulate for that. Either you have people like that or you don't, So I really want to emphasize that as a break that I have, Secondly, I think the distance, it's in many ways it's a negative thing when you're like out here in the US, maybe working on different things, it sucks. But also, I think that allowed me some freedom from some of those expectations. I knew they exist, but when you're not being reminded of them every day, you can continue to work in certain things until such a point that maybe they'll say, "Oh, this is what became of you," Like if maybe they'd been there the whole time, I would have given up, I would have done this or different things, right? Maybe I wouldn't have. But I say all this to say, that distance also helped facilitate that. But as far as what you can actively do, man, I think past a certain point, you know what you want to do. I think unless, like I always say, unless it's actively hurting other people, unless it's in your sense of morality, it's immoral, or if it's just like flat out illegal, do you, man? just do your thing within those bounds. And like we were saying earlier, like worst case scenario, you decide you didn't want to do it after all, or worst case scenario, you do it and it doesn't catch on. But just do you. The other thing I'll say too is find your community. A lot of times we think about our family, especially as Africans and other communities, but as Africans, our family is immutable. It's you can't change your family, and all those voices are very important to us, But and I can't possibly love my family any less than I do already. That's always going to be a thing. But I also know that they are not my writing community, They are not my. That's not, if I throw like a book launch, I'm blessed that a lot of them come. But if they don't, they are also not that community, you know what I'm saying? I've also got my writing community, I've got my other mentors and this and that. And that really helps a lot and that actually helps not only you grow, but it helps you preserve your relationship with family as well. Because, maybe they're not into that thing and maybe that's not why they're there for you, But for as long as you feel like that's what they're there for, you may develop some bitterness towards them. So I think develop alternate communities that feed you in other parts of your thing. That way, I can say like, I was with Luyando, man, and we spoke 2 hours about writing. Now I can go back to my sister who doesn't care about any of this, and we can talk about my nephews and nieces for 3 hours or for days without me ever thinking about, dang, why does he not care about my writing? Because that need has already been fulfilled somewhere else. So develop alternate communities as well that help enrich the different dreams that you have. If you get them from family, that's beautiful. But if you don't, then you have to actively cultivate those relationships as well outside. So.
Awesome. So in the interest of time, we just want to have 2 quick questions. And I have one question actually, especially as someone that read the book, right?
Yeah.
I've been eager to ask this question. So, one of the things that I think your book really taught me, I think back home growing up, we're often told you're gonna be a neurosurgeon, a doctor, a lawyer, whatever. I probably never at some point thought about being a writer, right? And so I always had this assumption that I was gonna write when I make it, maybe become a billionaire, maybe, become a doctor and inspire people, whatever, in some sort of form, invent something, right? Give a TED talk, then write about my experiences, right? So that was kind of my notion about writing. And your book sort of helped me sort of enhance the understanding that, I don't necessarily have to be at that particular level to write, I just gotta have a story to share. And all of us have stories we can write that are so pertinent that can, add to the conversations on different thematic areas, be they national, and cultural, conversations, be they just mundane things like you were saying, right? And so that was one key element of that, that really helped me understand, and I just want to say thank you. So my question is, how do you, let's see, where do you see yourself, I guess in the next 10 years? I mean, we don't know how to pan out, but like, where do you want to see yourself, especially as as a writer, and the kind of the legacy you'd love to have left on the, in terms of the broader spectrum, looking at African literature. Yeah, pretty much.
10 years. It's about time I got that Nobel Prize. No, I'm joking. As far as things that are within my control, I've got a few more books that I'm lining up. At least 2 in the next few years that I want to get out. One thing that I found is, and I was listening to somebody else talk about this on the radio, that like a 10-year plan is tough, man, to envision, because if I look at where I was 10 years ago, if you had asked me what the goals would be, maybe the PhD would have been a thing, because it's kind of like something that I've always wanted to do. But like where it took me and all the experiences that I've been through, I feel like I've actually done better than I would have, in many ways. Maybe not as much in other ways, because maybe I wanted to have $1 million by now, I don't know.
Right.
But I think like life has taken its own path, and this is good. But yeah, I wanna write a little more. I wanna, my legacy is very closely tied. The only thing that I really want to have a legacy in, I'll let the art speak for itself, but the philanthropic endeavors that I was talking about with that Clubhouse International organization, I think that is a far more important legacy, And in 10 years, hopefully I would have stepped away from the leadership of it in true, I don't want to be one of these Mugabe types. Pass on whatever power there is in a small philanthropy, to somebody else, but for that to continue to grow, But with the writing, man, I just hope more and more people read this. But again, I have a few more stories that I really must tell, So I'll be working on those. Typically if you can get like 2, people like Chinua Achebe are iconic, But a lot of people can only talk about like 2 of their books or so, if you do like 2 or 3 books that are really good, your legacy can be immortalized that way. That's not necessarily a driving force for me, but I also don't want to become one of these. Some people write a bunch of books, Danielle Steele, John Green type writers. I don't want to write a formulaic story. I just want to write, if the few stories that I feel I really must share. So yeah. But yeah, I guess we'll check in again in 10 years and see what happens.
All right.
Any other questions?
I have one if no one else.
I guess it's you.
So I was wondering, if you were to try and publish it in Zimbabwe, do you know how that would go? Or
Yeah, it would suck. No, I'm kidding. No, I say that, and I say that, me and Tiswana we talk a lot about this. He knows that I'm fiercely patriotic, but also I'm realistic about these things. Because I say that from a place of knowing. Because for a long time before I actually ended up with this publisher, this is the key part of my publishing process I didn't talk about, is I was shopping it out, And I shopped it out to Zimbabwean publishing house, and Weaver Press, which are prominent publishing houses in Zimbabwe. Might have been one other one, I can't remember, it's going to show the name, that I also shopped it out in Zimbabwe, Then also one or two in South Africa that I approached because I really wanted. In my mind, I felt like the people of Zimbabwe, or at least people in the region, should have first dibs on this story, this is their story. Then also shopped it out to some of the bigger publishers around in the Western world. But the reason why I say it would suck in Zimbabwe, and this is not a slight on the quality of publication the ones that have come out in Zimbabwe are iconic books for me, what I'm saying? Just like unmatched. But I don't know how people do business in some of these spaces, The inefficiencies are so bad that I remember I submitted it like 3 or 4 times with yeah, we're looking over it, we'll get back to you, right? They're like, hey, did you ever look at that thing? I go, oh, sorry, we have somebody new on the thing now, can you send it again? Then you do that like 3 or 4 times, or like there's a broken link on the website or something, like little things like that, that was just like very frustrating. I was like, you know what? At this rate, no, we're not, I'm gonna just do my own thing, so that's why I feel like I said, the books that do make it through, the writers who make it through are really, really good, but I have no doubt in my mind that, this Pashena is every bit as good as some of them, but those things just kind of frustrated me a little bit, and I felt like, we don't have forever, man. I'm not gonna be waiting around to publish the story, in another few years. So.
Awesome. I think that brings us to a close with this event. Thank you so much. I understand she might also have some copies if you plan on buying one. There's some copies you might want to sample out.
Yeah.
Please show support. This is particularly why we hold this event, basically to just celebrate African writers like him, and sort of celebrate the literature as well as, sort of give the value of actually reading our own stories more, because his story is our story too, right? So, yeah.
For sure. Thank you guys so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
You guys want to take a group picture? Oh, yes. Oh, you mean we can clap?